Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about ecosystems in vertebrate notes. We're going to focus on ecology, introduction to vertebrates, fish, amphibians, and reptiles, birds, and mammals. This should carry us the next 5 weeks of school. And this week, we're going to be talking about ecology. Ecology is broken down into ecosystems and their interactions. So, organisms are organized. We have the organism, the human being. The human being is connected to a population. We have family, a community, the town you live in. Then we have an ecosystem, the people, the buildings, a biome, state, United States, biosphere, our world, our planet. So when you think about where organisms are organized, you start small and you start seeing how they're connected to the entire world. So the big picture is the biosphere. It's the soil, the air, and surfaces where living things can grow. When you think about biomes, they're geographic areas with similar soil and climates. They have similar species adaptations, and they have common plants and animal characteristics of those climates. And you can see over here on the right-hand side, there's a picture, and that picture kind of shows you the different types of biomes. So there's quite a few different biomes. And when you look at these, there are 9 different biomes that we have identified. Starting number 1, the temperate forests. Number 2, the tropical rainforests. Number 3, the boreal forest. Number 4, savanna and grasslands. Number 5, desert. 6, tundra. 7, freshwater. 8, marine, which is saltwater. And then mountains. There are different subsets of these. It could probably grow up to like 19 or even 20 different types of biomes if you look at them more carefully. But we want to focus on these 9. So, ecosystems, a biological community of interacting organisms and their physical environment, otherwise known as their habitat. This will include the flora, which is the plants and the fungus, the fauna, animals, lower life forms like protists and bacteria, and the water and soil in those locations. Now notice that all 5 of the kingdoms that we have talked about show up here. Plants, fungi, animals, protists, and bacteria. They all show up. And we've talked about each one of those different kingdoms. So now it brings us to habitat, an organism's physical environment. You can think about it as a large habitat, like the whole ocean, or a forest or a jungle. Then you have small habitats, otherwise called microhabitats. A rotting log, maybe it's inside you, a large intestine or a large intestine inside of an animal. Parts of a stream, it's called the riffle, the run, or a pool in a stream. We've talked about these in the fall, biotic and abiotic factors. Biotic factors, living components of ecosystems. We have trees, predators, viruses, bacteria, pathogens. And then we have abiotic factors, non-living components of an ecosystem, sunlight, air, water, minerals. And those are all factors that affect an ecosystem and ecology. Interactions within a community. A community works like a team. Each member has its own job to do, but they all are connected. Interactions are driven by the need to obtain energy, how they eat, which we've talked about. You have producers, consumers, and decomposers, and how they all play a role. An example, in a forest community, there are grasses, rabbits, and foxes. The rabbits eat the grass, foxes eat the rabbits. So then we have food chains. Food chains, although we have a food chain here, the owl, the snake, the bird, the grasshopper, the plant, they're not very stable. They're actually less stable than food webs because once one organism population declines, it impacts the whole food chain. So in this example, if the snake begins to disappear or the population of snakes start to drop for some reason, what is the owl going to eat? Then the birds will then become, the population will become too much. Then we have a food web. Food webs are more stable than food chains because once an organism population declines, it has a less of an impact on the whole food web. So if I look at this food chain, almost every animal or organism is eating more than one item. So when you look at a food web, you have to think about how it's not saying that the ring seal is going to eat the polar bear. It's not the fact that the cod is going to eat the Arctic bird. It's actually the energy of the Arctic cod is being transferred to the bird when the bird eats the cod. The energy from the seals go to the polar bear when the polar bear eats the seals. So it's all about energy transfer is going to the other animal or the predator. So now it talks about homeostasis. Homeostasis, homeo equals same, stasis equals state of activity. A steady state that an ecosystem maintains before a disruption. Examples of things that could affect an ecosystem's homeostasis. Now, we've talked about homeostasis again in the fall, it was many weeks ago now, back in October or September, where you had talking about stable parts of your body, your body temperature, your blood sugar. Well, in a environment or an ecosystem, you have fire, tornado, volcano, hurricanes, humans, tsunami, and invasive species all could infect the homeostasis of an ecosystem. And every ecosystem can only handle so many critters or so many organisms. It's called a carrying capacity. Any given environment can only support so many organisms. If a population reaches its max, organisms have only a couple of options, or a few options. They can die, they can move on, or they have to adapt. They have to survive in that environment. And you can look over here that there's different seasonal surpluses based on the months of, the surplus of maybe birds or maybe different types of deer or rabbits, and how that kind of changes throughout the months at the bottom. And then it brings us to niches, or a niche. The role an organism plays in an ecosystem. Two organisms cannot occupy the same niche. If they did, they would have to compete for the same resources. They have to die, move, or adapt. So a niche is really unique. And once you find that niche, or an animal finds that niche, it doesn't want to compete with other organisms in order for it to survive. All right, that should bring us to the end of this part of the slideshow. And we'll talk later about the introduction of vertebrates another day.